Are you trying to learn Japanese or Chinese, but you're finding it really hard to remember the characters? It doesn't matter if you call it Kanji or Hanzi, the Chinese characters just don't stick in your brain. Like you go through a lesson, practice endlessly with flashcards, and you still can't remember which one is which. This is the video for you. When I started really focusing on learning Chinese, I thought the problem was I just needed to see the characters a lot. I figured Chinese people grow up just being surrounded by characters and that's how they know them, so really it's just a problem of immersion. I even went so far as I wrote my own app to just practice. Well, boy, was I wrong. I practiced and drilled endlessly, and I still couldn't recognize the characters. Even worse, two similar looking characters would completely trip me up. And don't even get me started on changing fonts or recognizing somebody's handwriting. Totally impossible. Let's take these two for example. These two characters, to the untrained eye, look pretty similar. And they are pretty similar, but they have totally different meanings. One is sort of like very, and the other one is eyeball. How can you tell these two apart? Well, fam, I cracked the code. I am so excited to tell you about this. This is actually the reason I started this channel, is that I have found a technique that's going to make Chinese characters, or kanji if you prefer, stick in your brain. We're going to make it so that you remember these with so much less effort. Doesn't matter if they're traditional or simplified, it works for either one. And it doesn't matter if they are written on a computer or handwritten. We're going to make it so you can distinguish and remember them. You can tell apart similar looking characters. It's going to make a world of difference to how you learn either Japanese or Chinese. So here's the trade-off. We're going to spend a few minutes preparing each vocab item to make it so that it's going to be a whole lot easier for you to practice and get these things to stick in your brain. This is a process I call bootstrapping. You can also call it stepping stones. But the idea is just a few minutes, just a little bit of work is going to make it so that it's a lot easier for you to recognize and understand the characters. After that, you're going to take your vocab words and put them into some sort of SRS like Anki or Brainscape or whatever, and practice them. And when you practice them, you're going to find this is going to be 100 times more effective than just mindless repetition. If you're used to Wanikani or Hanzi, this might seem similar to you because I'm borrowing a few of their techniques, but trust me, we're going to go way past what they have. For starters, because they sort of have a one-size-fits-all approach. I'm going to show you how to customize things so they work for you, which is going to be a lot more powerful. I went through a bunch of their stuff. I went through both Hanzi and Wanikani, and I liked it. I could see where they're coming from, but the stories never worked for me, so I always wrote my own. And I'm going to show you how to do the same thing. So with all that said, let's dive in. The first step to really understanding Chinese characters is to realize they're not random. They're made up of blocks, and these blocks, we call them radicals. And what we're going to do is we're going to figure out a way to make it so you can recognize these blocks like Lego bricks. And once you can do that, it makes things a whole lot easier to read and understand. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say I have these two shapes. You can tell them apart pretty easily because you're used to these shapes. You can say, yeah, this one has a diamond and this one has a pentagon. You could even make a story around it. You could say the diamond one is a cat, and say, okay, well, it's just sort of a diamond cat. You can make your own story for that. And then Pentagon, you could look at and say, well, the dogs of war and the US Department of Defense, aka the Pentagon, make a story there. And now it's really easy. The diamond one is a cat, the Pentagon is a dog. And you can recognize that. We want to do the same thing with Chinese characters. We just have to find a way to connect the different radicals so you can recognize them. And then, even if one of them changes slightly, let's say I take this diamond and I make it an outline instead of filled in, you still look at it and say, yeah, that's basically the same thing. That's what we're going to get to with Chinese characters. So now we know what we need to do. We need to break up the Chinese characters into repeating blocks. And the good news is they're basically already set up this way. So for example, this is the character for good, aka in Chinese, it's hao. And you can see that it's composed of two pieces. One is the radical for woman, and the other one is for child. And you put woman and child together and you get good. I guess that's just Chinese old world stuff, but it's easier to remember. You could look at the character ta, aka he or him, and say this is composed of human and also. He is also human. Okay, that makes sense. So now we have some building blocks to work with. So now you might be thinking, gee, thanks, Kai, you've broken down something I didn't understand into a bunch of blocks that I also don't understand. Well, the good news is that out of the thousands upon thousands of characters, they're almost entirely made up of a couple hundred radicals. And even those, only a few of them get used all of the time. So if you're like me, you might be thinking, okay, so I have to first memorize a few hundred radicals? That's going to take me forever. When do I start learning characters? No, you don't need to learn all the radicals first. And I really recommend not trying to sit down and learn radicals. What we're going to do is what I call bootstrapping. You're going to learn the radicals as you go and use them as stepping stones. Remember, at the end of the day, we don't actually want to learn radicals. We want to learn characters. So my approach is to learn them organically. As you're learning a new character, you learn the radicals that go with it. Now, if you want, in Anki or whatever SRS you're using, you can make cards for the radicals. That's what WaniKani does and a whole bunch of others. I personally just put them on the backs of my cards as a way to recognize the characters, and I find that works for me. Remember, the fundamental thing that I mentioned in the previous video is to make sure things work for you. So if you like having cards for radicals and you find that helps you out, go for it. If you find that's getting in your way and it's just too much overhead, don't bother. Just put it on the back of your cards. Do whatever works for you. A few tips to help you working with radicals. The first is, when you can, use the quote-unquote standard radicals. There's this set called Kanji. For example, there's some basic radicals like human and person and earth that have sort of standard meanings. And that's really useful because they show up again and again, and you don't have to create your own anything. And they do actually sometimes connect to the meaning of the characters. But on the other hand, radicals like flute. Who makes a radical this complicated and claims that this is a repeating block? I've seen it in one character, and I'm sure it appears in others, but this is crazy complicated. Personally, it doesn't work for me. Don't waste a lot of time making up your own radicals. I actually really don't like Hanzi and WaniKani for making up a bunch of radicals that don't exist anywhere else. But at the same time, if the radicals don't make sense to you, it's not going to work. Come up with new things when you need to, but use the standard ones when they make sense. If there's a character that appears as a radical inside of another character, you can use that. For example, the radical for can, this is ke in Chinese, I see it all the time in other characters. And because I know this one very well, I'll oftentimes just use that as a radical. Remember that you don't have to use the radicals too. If you come up with a character and it just looks like something to you, you can use that. Use whatever it takes so that you remember it. Don't get stuck. I find the character for still or yet high in traditional Chinese really complicated. It's got a bunch of things that fit normal radicals, but there's some junk at the end that just isn't like anything else. So I label everything else, and then I leave the rest. I literally have it labeled on my card as junk. And so I look at it and say, oh, walk, net, one, there's a mouth, and then just there's some junk at the bottom. And you can do that, so long as it works for you. Remember that at the end of all of this, the point is to make it so you can remember the characters. These are stepping stones to recognizing and differentiating the characters. So do what works for you, and you'll come out ahead. The next obvious question is, how do you get a radical breakdown? Well, I have some software I've written in Python that does it, but you can also go to a lot of dictionaries. My suggestion is to use something like MDBG, or you can find different sites on the internet or things in Python and so on that will give you suggested breakdowns. But remember, you will need to tweak it. I have not seen a single site yet that does it perfectly. Take what they have as a suggestion, look at the character and say, does that work for you? Does it not? Look at a list of standard radicals and come up with something that works. 90% of the time, you'll be able to take what's there. Sometimes you'll have to tweak things. And remember, perfect is the enemy of good. Try to get something that's good enough and move on quickly. so that you learn your characters. Now you have your character and a radical breakdown. How are you going to remember that? If you have, say, this character, the character for chair, and you break it down as tree, big, vigorous mouth, how do you connect those four things to a chair? This is where mnemonics come in. As we talked about in the last video, a mnemonic is anything that's going to connect two different ideas for you. In this case, we want to make some kind of a story. It doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, the simpler the better, so long as it's some provocative story, something that works and has meaning for you. For me, what I did with this character is I said the big boss with his big, vigorous mouth sits in the big wooden chair and shouts his orders at people. That story works for me. You can choose whichever story it is that works for you. So how do you come up with a story quickly that works for you? Sometimes one will just jump out at you, but what if not? Well, just like in the last video, we have a tool for this. It's Gen AI. ChatGPT or any other AI out there, you just go and tell it, give me a mnemonic that connects this word, chair, to these other words, make me a story, go. And it will write a little story for you. For example, you could give it chair and give it these four concepts, or if you're looking for a different character, give it what you have and it'll write a story for you. Just remember to customize it for yourself. Make sure the story works for you. Now we have a character, we have a radical breakdown, and we have our mnemonic. Are we done yet? Just like last time, we can do better. Remembering your story takes effort. We want to take effort out of this. We can make visual mnemonics, and they're going to stick in your brain so much better. How do we do that? Once again, we go to AI. We say, make me an illustration for this story. Going back to our previous example, we have the character for chair, and we want to say the big boss shouts orders using his big, vigorous mouth from his big wooden chair. I took that, put that into ChatGPT, and here's the image it gave me. Not bad, eh? The image doesn't have to be perfect. Notice he's not actually saying anything in this picture, but it illustrates it. It makes it jump out. I can look at this and I instantly know from this picture that was my mnemonic, and it jumps into my brain. Again, just like the last video, this might seem silly to be making these pictures, but trust me, it works. When you have a picture, it jumps into your brain 10 times faster than if you just had text. You've taken your character, broken it into radicals, made a mnemonic story out of it, and made an illustration. Now you have to practice it. The good news is that after you've done all this work, you should find that the practice comes a lot easier. You only need to look at the card 2, 3, 4 times before it starts to stick into your brain. You'll get a lot more traction a lot faster, but you still have to practice. So throw all this stuff into Anki, put it on the back of your card so that when you are reviewing, you look at it. If you get to a card and you look at a character and it doesn't come to you right away, try to break down the characters to radicals and try to remember your story. And you'll find sometimes, even though you look at it first and go, oh, I don't know this character, after a few seconds it'll come to you. And that's perfect. That's exactly what you want. That mental effort will actually get you there a lot faster. If after 20, 30 seconds you're still really not getting it, don't worry about it. You're still learning. Flip the card over, go through your mnemonic, go through your breakdown, refresh your memory, mark it as again, and come back to it. And trust me, you will find with time it's going to stick. To recap the whole process, if you really want to remember characters, what you need to do is first break them down to radicals that make sense to you. Make a mnemonic out of those radicals. Make an image out of that mnemonic. Put all of that into Anki or whatever SRS you're using. Practice, 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 and you'll find it's going to stick. Not going to lie, that's going to take you anywhere between 2 and 5 minutes for each vocab item. I know it takes me at least that long, but In the long run, things stick a whole lot better, so you save time overall and you get a lot more fluent than if you just try to skip all of this and go straight to repetition. This also means you'll probably be bottlenecked by card creation, and that's okay. If you're thinking carefully about the content that you're learning and not just mindlessly practicing cards, this is a good thing. You want to be thinking about what words you're learning and how they make sense, and you'll find you'll get to fluency a lot faster. My process overall when it comes to Chinese is now basically 3 steps. I first make a mnemonic for the pronunciation, exactly like I talked about in the last video, and then I go through each character and I do exactly the process from this video. I break things down to radicals, I make mnemonic stories, and I make images. And I put all that together into one Anki card, and I practice that until it's second nature. I've been doing this for months now, and it's been a game changer for me. I hope that likewise it'll change how you learn and get you to be fluent much, much faster. I do have a plugin for Anki that I've been working on. It makes my process a lot faster. If you'd like to see it or you'd like to help me out with it, leave a comment below. Maybe I'll make a video or maybe I'll put it out there. The problem is it uses a bunch of OpenAI API keys, so I can't really publish those, but I can show you what I've done, and if you think it's useful, I could see about trying to get it set up for everybody else to use. Let me know in the comments what's working for you, what's not working, what questions you have. I'd love to talk about this. And if you did find this helpful, please do like and subscribe. I'm just starting this channel. It would really help me to grow things here. Leave a comment below with what you think, and good luck.